So I wanted to start this series. It's not even really like a series. I don't have like a name for it. Maybe we'll just call it Jim's Hot Takes. But there's conversations that I've had with people in the industry about things that we do in the industry. And Lucas said something recently in one of his videos, and he talked about how we need to have the hard conversations to try to progress the industry forward. And I know he was talking about something else, but that got me thinking about some of these conversations that I have and that I know other people in the industry have that maybe need to be brought to the public so that we can continue this conversation as a community or as an industry to try to progress things. And so one of the things I want to talk about today is the way that we do instruction in the firearms industry is counterculture to what most other high performers do in different industries. What I mean by that is in our industry, courses and classes are set up in 8-hour blocks. They're done on a weekend, on like a Saturday or Sunday, or it's a 2-day course or whatever. But it's a lot of information in a big block of instruction. There's a lot to cover. But when you look at high performers in other industries, that's not how they take in information. You look at top performing athletes and the way that their practices are set up, specifically with coaches, and the way that they take in that information. I got to play soccer at a high level when I was younger, and a part of the studies they did on student athletes at the time was attention span. So how do top performing athletes or even mid-level athletes perform over these long periods of time? You have a 90-minute soccer game, you have a 2 to 3 hour football game, whatever it may be. How do they stay focused for that time? And what they found in that study is that the best athletes in the world aren't focused the entire game. What they do is they switch on and switch off. So they have the ability to switch on when they need to focus, and then you often hear this phrase in sports where he took that play off. And it just means they checked out mentally. And that allows them to reset to be focused. And so to be focused and get the most out of even a 3-hour game is not possible for the best athletes in the world. So then why do we take shooters, average shooters, and put them in an 8-hour course where we're expecting them to take in all this new information and do these things that are foreign? And to put it in another way, in a way that I think a lot of us can relate to, is that say, for instance, you had an 8-year-old daughter who was struggling in math, and she needed to improve at certain things in her math skill set so that she could continue to progress in her class and not be held back, and all the repercussions that come with that. So you start looking for tutors, and you find a tutor who says, yeah, I can work with her, and what we'll do is once a quarter, I'll sit down with her for 8 to 16 hours on a Saturday and Sunday, and we'll go over everything she needs to know for that quarter, and then she can work through that on her own, and then we'll come back and we'll address some more things in the next quarter. And then you think, okay, well, that might not work out too great for her, so let's see if there's other tutors out there. And another tutor says, yeah, I can work with her. What we'll do is for an hour, maybe 2 hours a week or every other week, I'll sit down with her. We'll go through certain things. We'll set a baseline to start with just to see where she's at, to see how far the gap is between where she's at and where she wants to be or where you want her to be. And we will slowly start to work away at those things. We'll start to build upon another. And I will spend an hour with her, maybe 2 hours a week or every other week. And then from there, I will give her homework to do at home, things, exercises, skills, drills that she can work on her own and continue to progress. And if she runs into any issues, feel free to reach out, and I can either take note of that and we'll address it at the next meeting, or I can give you some ways to tweak it that might help her. And so you think, okay, well, that might work better for my daughter and for my student to get her the long-term progress that we need. And I think that if we take the same approach to shooters, I think we'll start to see more progress in shooting. Now, the big issue here that we have to decide as a community, or even as instructors, and this isn't a knock on any instructor. Every instructor instructs this way. It's just the way that it's been done. And so I'm not attacking anyone or saying they're doing anything wrong. I'm just saying, is there a better way to achieve the goal? That's where the crux lies, is what is the goal that we're trying to achieve? Are we trying to put on courses, or are we trying to progress shooters? Because if we're trying to progress shooters, our current model of doing courses might not be the best way. It is definitely the most convenient way, and logistically speaking, it makes sense because you have to find a range, you have to get enough people there for it to make sense for the instructor to come out. You're gonna get the most bang for your buck. But if to use another analogy, if we were taking golfers and there was like, hey, I'm new to golf, I wanna learn how to golf, I wanna get better at it. You said, okay, cool, I'm putting on a course, there's gonna be 20 other students there, it's gonna be an 8-hour course, and I'll work with you through there, but you're not gonna get one-on-one attention. Or are you gonna go to the instructor who says, come in for a golf lesson, we'll dial up a set program for you, that works for you based on your swing, based on your body makeup, your mechanics, your limitations, physically, if you're out of shape, if you have just certain injuries, whatever. We'll work around that and find something that works for you, and we'll work over time to make that. Of course, we're all going to go that route. So I think that if we are committed to progressing as shooters, then I think that instructors maybe have to start looking that route. Now, I don't know that will happen. I don't think it'll happen anytime soon, because if instructors could or would do that, they probably would do that already. But I think that as a shooter myself and a consumer of courses, I would prefer to have that coaching style, to have a coach who could coach me through and help me progress as a shooter. Someone who could set a baseline and then give me things to work on, and then we touch base pretty regularly for them to look at and see, okay, am I making the progress I need to make? Maybe I'm making progress faster than we thought. Maybe it's slower than we thought. And adjusting course as needed. We see this in powerlifting. We see this in baseball pitching and batting coaching. We see it in soccer, football. We see it at every level of athlete and high-level performance. We see this consistent coaching over time, not going to this instructor this month, this instructor this month, this instructor that month. There is no continual progression. It's up to you as a shooter to try to weed through that and figure that out. So I think that for us, the shift that we'll see that will actually progress shooters is for us to go from what I call a seminar style of instruction to a more coaching style. And the reason I say seminar style is if you're in the medical industry, if you're in the education industry, in a variety of others, what they have is continuing education credits. And what that is it just means you go to this, you take this online thing, you go to this, someone does a talk, whatever, you get a book, and you have to read through that chapter and take a quiz afterwards, whatever it is. There's some new idea, some concept, whatever it is, and it's about the same time as what our courses are. And you take that and you check off the box, yep, I'm continuing my education, I got the credit for it. You have so many you have to get every quarter or every year in order to keep your status in the medical field or as a teacher or whatever it is. That's kind of how shooting is. We have these courses that are set up like seminars, but there's no flow or continuation of one idea to the next because the instructors are so different. Again, this is not a negative on any instructor, it's just the nature of the beast as it sits right now. So I think that if an instructor were to come along who were well-rounded and well-versed in some of the different ideas and concepts about grip, recoil management, trigger reset, reloads, and I don't want to get into tactics because that's a whole nother thing, but a lot of the fundamentals that we work in some of these classes, if they were well-versed in that and they were very diverse in their own understanding, they could then coach students through that progression. And so what that might look like is them having 20 or 30 students like a powerlifting or a bodybuilding coach might have. They set a baseline for them, a test to see where they're at. They go out on range with them for an hour, maybe 2 hours a week or every other week. They give them dry fire to do. I know there's whole controversy around dry fire, but there's a lot of good things we can work in dry fire. For me, when I learned red dot, one of the first things I did was just taking from a high ready or a compressed ready and pressing out to get my dot there every time, just getting consistent with it. And then I started doing it with a timer that on the random stimulus of a timer, then pressing out. And then once I felt comfortable with that, then I added in the draw aspect of that. And then as I started learning concealed carry and then trying to improve my concealed carry this year, I started to do that more and more with the timer. Again, working those same things, just building one block on the other. And as I progressed, I move on to the next thing, continuing to work those previous things, but trying to get me closer to the goal where I want it to be. And so then you start setting times around those goals. What do we want our build drill times to start being? What do we want our split times to start being? Things like that we start to work, because you can do a lot in dry fire. The only thing that you can't work in dry fire is recoil management. You can work literally everything else. You can work your draw, your sight presentation, your sight picture, your reloads. You can even start to learn where the break of your trigger is and the reset, become accustomed with that. You can work every aspect of shooting aside from the actual recoil management. So there's a lot that can be done at home, and even if that, the coach may look at it and go, okay, hey, here's our baseline, here's the thing that we're gonna work on this week. Now go home and build off of that. Here's some drills that you can do in dry fire. I want you to do this for 30 minutes a day, every day, go through, and then we'll come test you again next week, see if you've made the progress we wanna make, and if you have, we move on to the next thing. If not, let's refine and figure out what issues we're having. And this continues on until you get to a very high level, and even at the highest level, you're just refining and getting down and taking away tenths of a second or hundredths of a second from split times, from draw times, and I think that's where we'll see big progression as shooters. So that's something that I wanted to pose to you guys, that I was like, hey, what do you think about that? What do you as a shooter, which would you prefer, and which makes more sense for you in your progression? Now, because the state of the industry and where we're at, that's not going to change anything right now, but what we can do is start to try to build out some of that programming on our own. So as you go to an instructor, right, come into that instruction with, what is it I want to get out of it? Like, right, setting goals for yourself. Like, what is the thing I really want to harp on? Because almost every good instructor I've been to, they ask that to their students either the day of or in an email, like, hey, what do you want to get out of this class? Make sure we hit on that. Or they'll tell you straight up, hey, look, this isn't the class for that. Maybe come to this one. So having a clear idea of the progress you want to make and what the timeline in that looks like. And then when you take the class, film as much as you can. So that way you have, I know not every instructor will let you do this, but film as much as you can so that you have these tidbits to go back to. And I think that will also help you progress, because then you can go back and revisit these ideas and concepts, and you're still learning the same thing over and over again, because you're not gonna learn it all in one day. Like, there's no way you're gonna take in all that information in one day. And the reason I know this is because, one, high-level performers don't do it, but two, I'm currently working with a handful of instructors to turn their courses into these online segments that people can go. And so I know for one, right now we're working through a catalog, and we just did 65 videos, and each one of them is a 3 to 5 minute video. I think the longest is 10 minutes. But each one of them covers a different topic, that where you can go and look for that specific thing and watch the teaching block on that, and then go apply it, or just to get a refresher. And I think that's another aspect that we haven't really tapped into as instructors or as shooters, is that there's a lot we can do through digital media. Because we have video and photo, there's a lot that can be done through diagrams. I mean, Preston did some diagrams for us with the average dose challenges. Those were phenomenal, and setting up drills that people can see and take those out. But even in video, there's a lot we can do. Now, there's some things like when Jedi draws the arrows on your hand, when he shows you, there's nothing that's gonna replace that. And that's why you still need the coach, you still need the second set of eyes, you still need the time on range with somebody who's going to coach you through the fundamentals or whatever skill it is you're trying to get. But what we can do is start to wind down some of those things that take up a lot of time on range that could be done in a video, like a how to zero video. Like, Average Joe's is working on things like that right now. That's why you're seeing Average Labs. Reloads can be done over video. Your safety brief. Going into a class, if you gave them a 10-minute safety brief in a video and said, hey, if you're a new shooter, practice these things at home so that when you come to the range, you're comfortable, it's not foreign to you. In golf, one of the things that happens is Ben Hogan said, if you're a new golfer, you should spend the first week to 2 weeks just gripping a golf club, never taking a swing, just so your hands get used to how they sit on the club and it doesn't feel so foreign, so that when you're swinging, you're not worried about how awkward your hands feel and you're more worried about the mechanics. In the same way, for a lot of people who are new shooters, gripping a pistol in the proper way, or the way that gives you the best recoil management, is awkward. And if we said, hey, this first lesson, if you're a new shooter, we're just gonna work on getting you in the right position for grip. And so we may only spend 15, 20, 30 minutes. We don't even have to be on range. Just make sure you have the proper grip. You're gonna go practice that for the next week or two, and then we'll start to get into live fire. Then we'll start to get into trigger press, trigger prep, trigger reset, recoil management, and those things. We can start to break down these things to be more efficient with our time, so that long-term we're in a better place. Maybe it takes a little more work on the front end of getting them to that point, because you're having to coach 20 students through this throughout a week or whatever. But again, this goes back to what I said earlier. What's the goal? If the goal is to create progress as shooters, then I think there might be a better way to do it. And I'm not saying that this is the end-all be-all. I'm not saying instructors should stop doing what they're doing, because there's a ton of great instructors out there, and the way they're doing courses work for a lot of people, but I'm just saying there might be a better way. And I'm just trying to pose that question so that we can begin to think through this, and maybe some of the new instructors coming up in the next year or 3 years or 5 years, maybe we start to see a shift. Maybe we start to see more progression as shooters, especially the average shooter, and it will help our industry as a whole. So that's my hot take for the day. Make sure you hit that like and subscribe. Karate chop that bell to get notified every time I upload a video, and I will see you guys in the next one.